So you play Troy in the dystopian thriller Last Survivors. How was that character originally described to you?
Well, the truth is, I got sent it to read. So I already knew what the story was when I read it. But then when Drew Milray, director, got on the phone together, it was lovely, actually. I happened to be back in England. I can't remember what I was doing. But it was one of those times where I was home alone. I think I was doing a job there, and I wasn't like doing crazy Macaulay Culkin things, like and setting up shit in the window. I wasn't doing that. I've got better things to do with my time. But I was home, and we just got talking, and we chatted for about an hour and a half about what it would feel like to run away, to because of some cataclysmic event, what you'd do, where you'd go, how you'd survive, what you'd bring with you, what you would try and create, what kind of, and we talked about sort of the Swiss Family Robinson, we talked about the utopian dream, we talked about the beautiful sort of isolation of it. We also talked about being away from devices and how that would feel, and how we'd get back to a sort of, primal sense of communication, where you wouldn't necessarily need to speak all the time because you would understand each other. You'd be in flow. You'd be in a kind of really natural state of flow. And I loved it. We weren't to know at that time, but, we were hoping to do it, I think, like somewhere like in the desert in Arizona or something, in the middle of nowhere, just like kind of, plains. But then, of course, the pandemic hit, and it changed everything. And so we ended up in Montana in the snow. And I think that the film really benefits from it because Julian's photography is beautiful, Drew's direction's incredible, and you do feel like you're bedded into this kind of utopian space. So I knew who he was, I knew what he was, I knew what he was trying to do. I always talk about it in terms of there being this kind of World War III, this cataclysmic event that has sort of catapulted them into this place, and he's just doing everything he can to be the best father he can be under the circumstances.
Absolutely. That actually is a perfect segue into my next question is, are there any elements of Troy's characterization that you brought to the role that weren't necessarily in the script?
Yeah, good question. Going back to that idea of non-verbal communication, if he's gutting a deer, if he is preparing a meal, given that these two men have been together for 20 years, each of them will know their place and their part in this ritual. And so we sort of, we tried to sort of play a game where the other one would sort of try and intuit what the other one was thinking or what was happening. And we tried to sort of create a shorthand without dialogue, which I think, happens really nicely in the movie. You get a sense of it a little bit. It's hard in an hour and a half movie because you're trying to communicate so much, but I think we got a couple of really nice little beats where you sort of set that idea up. That wasn't in the script. That was just stuff that we played with. Also, he's the father figure, and the father figure thinks that they are right, and so we also tried to play with what that would feel like to be in that position of power, and psychological impact of certain ways in which we are status wise. I remember when we were at drama school, we played it's a really cool game. It's going to sound really drama schooly now, but you get given a playing card, and you're the only one that knows. You get given a playing card, and it's face down, right? And you put it on your head, so you cannot see what number you are.
Okay.
Everybody else in the room can see what number you are,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see what number everybody else is. And 10 is the highest status, and 2 is the lowest status. So you can tell by the way people speak to you what status you are.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, you all end up sort of, playing this game. But it also works in the other way around, where somebody gets given, the big status, and the other people kind of have to work out who they are in line of that. And all of those sort of games and those sorts of physicality, and they're really interesting if you've got time. We didn't have a great deal of time. I think we had like 17 days, 18 days, but and me and Drew Van Acker had like 8 or 9 days, I think, altogether.
Okay.
So you're really trying to kind of condense like those relationships together and try and make it zing as soon as you can. But we played some games like that, avoiding eye contact, and what that would do to him if he was trying to sort of seek my be on the end of sort of trying to intuit things so that he got my call and response kind of idea. It was really fun, really enjoyable stuff. And I think that you see a little bit of it in the film.
Definitely. I agree. And we'll kind of revisit that a little bit later on, because there is a level of familiarity between the two of you that all underplays with the tension that's also there. It's pretty dynamic. But when you read the script, what made you want to sign on? I know there were some differences in the script versus what came to fruition, but it still seems like it was worthwhile for sure.
It was an interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? I'm always looking for. There's this point as a man and a woman, obviously, but there is this point in your life, in your career, where you suddenly are not playing the juvenile lead anymore, and it's just a weird thing. And it happened to me quite early. I had been the youngest person in the room for the longest time, for like the first 12 years of my career. I think because I looked young or whatever, and then suddenly I was a dad. And so you invariably, you kind of are aware that the roles that come in are those sort of parental figures. And what I liked about it was how close they are. It's clever writing. I really like the setup. I really like the idea of this apocalyptic world, but without giving anything away. It's a turn on that. It's a twist on that in a way, which is really interesting. And I really liked the character, and I liked the idea of, I went down sort of survivalist rabbit hole and what you would need to do, and there's some crazy stuff out there. Living off grid, and what that would mean and how you would do it, and really disappearing, how you would really disappear. Anna and I just watched Mosquito Coast, actually. Have you seen it? The Apple show. It's really good.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
Really good. And without giving anything away, the central premise is, a family have to leave for a certain reason. Mm-hmm. And funnily enough, when I was watching it, it really reminded me of The Gifted. Okay. Because The Gifted is when Bryan Singer and Matt Nix got together to sort of talk about what The Gifted was going to be about. They talked about Running on Empty, which is a wonderful Sidney Lumet movie with Judd Hirsch and young River Phoenix, and they are basically communists, and they're wanted by the government, and so they were on the run. And I think it's Martha Plimpton is the kid. I think I could be wrong about that. But basically, the kids end up like they just want to live a normal life, but because their parents are on the run from the FBI or the CIA or whatever, they just go from hotel to hotel, and so I love that kind of premise, that conceit, and how you would live and how you would not get seen. So I was really interested in that, and Drew Milray and I talked for hours about ways of know, who he was, and we did some improv around it, and you know, it's just fun stuff.
Yeah.
A really, really, so you know, I'd been sort of looking to try and do different things as well. So you know, it's quite interesting because this last 18 months I've done like 6 projects, and they are all different in their own way. There's like super highly commercial, there's really not, and you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, this one seems like, you know, seems like there was a short shooting time frame. It was very run and gun, seems like.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be.
Okay.
When we all signed on, it was bigger budget, you know, different place. As I said, it was going to be in the sun, not the snow.
Yep.
But we had all signed on, you know, a year before. We were actually due to be shooting around April. And then the pandemic happened, so it was put back. And I don't think any of us thought it was going to happen. And then suddenly they got in touch with us, and when we can go in December.
Okay.
So we were like, okay.
Yeah.
I was actually in England shooting something else at the time, so I went straight from England to Montana.
Wow.
But yeah.
It often feels like Troy is trying to balance controlling his son and, you know, with his need to protect his son. And how did you find that balance in your portrayal? Because I think it really comes through that, you know, this could very well be in the best interest of his son, but maybe there's something else going on here.
I think one of the things they talk about, and I think this is just, I think I've just learned this through doing, but when you're approaching a character, you have to like that person. You have to like, you know, of course there are examples of somebody hating themselves and disliking themselves, or, you know, psychologically. But you as the actor, when you're embodying it, you sort of have to fall in love with who that character is and what they're doing why they're doing it. And that comes later, the self-loathing or whatever it is. But in Troy's case, it's absolutely that he thinks he's doing the right thing, because his past experience has led him to this place of protection. So for me, there's no games. It's real. He is absolutely committed to looking after his son, and his relationship with what he sees as the outside world is absolutely authentic for him and his experience. So he genuinely 100% believes that what he's doing is the right thing for that kid, and therefore anything that gets in the way of that, you know, there'll be repercussions for that.
I think one thing that this movie does really well is kind of explore the darkness that needs to live within certain good intentions. So, you know, Troy is very well equipped to survive in these extreme circumstances. But part of me thinks, and I want to know your thoughts on this, that speaks to an underlying darkness outside of just a will to survive.
Yeah. I mean, if we put ourselves into the shoes of the characters and where they are and what they're experiencing, and if you believe, from Troy's point of view, as we just said in the previous question, I do, or I had to put myself there, then you believe that anybody coming into that encampment embodies evil. And so your wrath against that is to destroy the evil. So yeah, is there darkness there? Yeah, fuck there is. And he totally sees it everywhere that isn't him and his son.
Yeah.
Anything. And also, you know, and whether it's correct or not, there is an underlying emotional umbilical connection between them that he's terrified of losing. And but I think if you scratched the surface, it would be because it's all he's got. Mm-hmm. And he's terrified of losing it, obviously. So again, I would argue he sees darkness everywhere, and he thinks that his darkness and his temper and his anger is necessary darkness. But I don't think he sees himself as a bad person. Now, you know, spoiler alert. You know, that there, for whatever happened in the past, there is, whether it's some kind of psychotic break or something even worse than that. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that I have some experience with an acquaintance of mine who I was at dinner with some friends last night, and we were talking about this thing where something had happened and this person absolutely does not remember this thing. Mm-hmm. And funnily enough, actually, we were talking about in a temper. Mm-hmm. When something happens, and he's just like, it's not there. And there's this joke, long-standing joke that we all say, that everybody speaks about, that is because of this event, that mm-hmm. the person who is the engendered this event does not remember. Hmm. And it's not because he's willfully a bad human. Yep. He just, like, in this moment of rage that he was in, said something that we all thought was hilarious, and we tease him about, but he's completely unaware of it because he doesn't remember doing it. Mm. So all I'm saying is, we have things that I think we've blocked out or rebuilt. Like, it's like when you tell stories about something that happened that was funny, you know, whether it was like you fell over in some snow or whatever it was. Yeah. As that story grows, it becomes the story that you tell as opposed to the truth of the thing. Mm-hmm. Right? So the absolute truth of the thing, like if I turned around to my family and I tell a story, and my sister's there, she'll go, that is not how that happened. You know, you've just embroidered it to make it into a funny story. Mm-hmm. But because I've lived it 100 times and told the story maybe multiple million times, I've made it into a good story as opposed to the truth. And I think we all have ways in which we do that, because the way I live the truth is different from the way you live the truth. So I do think that I really stand by his belief that I think it's much more interesting if he thinks he's doing the right thing.
Yeah, I have to agree. Did you know Drew prior to filming? I know you said that you played some of those games, but there is a level of familiarity there that and chemistry that is hard to just, you know, it's luck.
I didn't know him, and we hadn't spoken. Oh. But I think I arrived 6 days before shooting, and I had to do maybe a little bit more, but I had to do like 4 or 5 days quarantine before I could come out. Mm-hmm. So before I could even do costume fittings, etc. So when I got to Montana, I just put my head down into work, and you know, I've said before in a few interviews that for an actor it's fabulous, because you know, if you're locked in a room with the script and the mm-hmm. internet, it's fantastic. If there's nothing else that you can do and you're not allowed out of the room, mm-hmm. you just work, you know, you just work. And so by the time we met up, which was on the 3rd or 4th, I guess like the 5th evening or something, that I was finally allowed out, we had like I think it was the weekend, I think it was the Saturday and the Sunday, and we were starting on the Monday. And we just got together, we talked, we played, we sort of watched each other. I could see he was watching my physicality. And we sat around table and we sort of dissected what had happened and how life had been, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really cool. It's just, yes, it is luck. Of course, it's luck, but there's also the element of wanting it to be good and wanting to enjoy it, and I love the mechanism of how we make film. I love every element of, from the camera loader through to the best boy. I just love filmmaking, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm really into just having a good time and trying shit.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
What was it like working with such a small and mighty cast? Drew, but also Alicia Silverstone, Mark Famiglietti. It was very self-contained, but I would say powerhouse cast.
I didn't work with Mark, but met him. Had to tread over his body. I thought Alicia had done some of the best. Funny because her mum's English, and so we say Alicia as opposed to Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her at one point, I was like, everybody calls you Alicia, don't they? And she was like, yeah, but it's wrong. Because my mom was English. I was like, right, good, I'm correct. But I think she's fantastic, and I think it's one of, and I haven't seen all of her performances, but of the stuff I've seen, I just think it's a beautiful performance. I was blown away by it, and I think, and I think it's, but I think that the actual pinnacle, the fulcrum of the film, the hinge is really Drew, because without him, it doesn't work, and he manages to portray the innocence. Mm-hmm. And the faith in his dad, the love of his dad, and this new life with her, without giving too much away, really, really well. I think it's an excellent performance. So I think it's a cracking little film, actually.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think I know that it's hitting streaming, or it has been streaming for a while, and it came up on my Roku the other day, and before I even knew about this, and I watched it, and I'm a fan. Yes, Drew, the director, only has a few feature-length films under his belt, but it's still an impressive body of work. Describe your experience kind of working with and learning from one another. I always think it's great to see newer directors working with actors who just have such an impressive filmography.
He's gonna be fantastic. I really enjoyed him. I think we really enjoyed each other, actually. There was, as I said, from that very first phone call, that very first FaceTime that we had together, I think we just got on really well, and talking about the surface, and then what's underneath it, and then the subcutaneous layers of character and psyche, and one of the nice things about being locked in your room is which is one of the great joys I have found of quarantine. Everybody sort of goes, what do you do? It's like I was in Bulgaria before that, where I was in there for 10 days, and it was earlier on in the lockdown, and then 10 days for the job in England.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's just like, as long as I can get some food in, then I'm old now, and learning lines is not easy. So it's like, just being there and having to do it is great. And so playing those games, talking through stuff, I always, when I have time, always write a sort of character history of, and it's not stuff that you're ever going to know, but I work out where that person is from, where they went to school, and I go on a map, and I go to Google Maps, and I work out the town, and I write a little prehistory. And as I said, It's not for anybody else. It's for me, so that I know who I am and where I'm rooted. And it also might not correspond with anybody else that I'm working with. You know, when I was working with Dennis O'Hare on True Blood, Dennis wrote a 3,000 year history of his character, because he was 3,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a 3,000 year
he was the best villain, I think.
He was just amazing. It was amazing to watch. And he did this thing one day. I think it was the first episode that I directed, which would be season 5.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this thing, and a writer called Mark Houdis, who's lovely, was sitting next to me, and he'd written that episode, and we were sitting at Video Village, and he did something, and we both at the same time went and then looked at each other and like got chills, and then it took me on this journey. I went to this whole like journey of, I'm going to write a character for him where he plays that thing that he just did, like literally was this tiny little thing. But when I asked him about it afterwards, I said to him, you did something that was really interesting. And he was like, yeah, I was going back to my Germanic roots. In like 256 AD, I was in Germany. And he had this whole reason why for that 2 lines he had become Germanic. And I was just like, fuck, just, you know, amazing. But all of that stuff's just like, that's just like deep rooted stuff for the actor to have.
Yeah.
To know. So I don't know why I got onto this. I can't even remember what the fucking question was. I'm so sorry.
Just learning from Drew.
My wife was here. She would be going, shut up. Drew. Drew, I think, is going to be brilliant. He's not completely set in his ways. He's got ideas of what he wants to do. He's got ideas of the direction that he thinks it's going in. But if you give him something different, mm-hmm. he's really excited. And then suddenly he'll kind of go, okay, right. And then he'll take what you've given him and go off in a different direction. And I love that. I find that really kind of energetic and energizing rather, and fun, you know. I really enjoyed him, and I thought, and he's got a very sort of distinct sense of what he wants, but a sense of play as well. And him and Julian, the DP, are good friends, and they've got a very spiky friend relationship, mm-hmm. which is, you know, kind of sometimes quite fuck, and then sometimes quite funny, but it's creative, mm-hmm. which is great.
Awesome. My final question is there a message or anything you would like viewers of Last Survivors to take away from it?
You know, it's a difficult one, because I think if we've done our job right, you'll go away thinking that everybody in their own way was in the right, and everybody in their own way was in the wrong too.
Yeah.
And life is grey.
Absolutely.
And the best bits of life are the greyest. Mm-hmm. You know, and so hopefully even if something terrible happens, you'll kind of understand where it comes from and where it was built and why it was there. Mm-hmm. And so nothing's as simple as it seems, I guess. And I always want, personally, unless it's just balls to the wall comedy, I always want to leave the theatre and stand outside on the pavement for 10 minutes talking about the film, going, but what if, why did so, you know, mm-hmm. you know, I remember coming out of Mother, the Aronofsky movie, and stood with some friends outside for like 50 minutes, just standing outside the theatre shouting at each other. And there were people who had hated it and there were people who had loved it. But it engendered debate. And so I'm all about that. I love that.
Perfect. I think I'm right there with you. Those are the best movies, the ones where you have to have a discussion to even know what you're thinking.
It was really funny because the group of people that I'm talking about, they all wanted to go and see, you know, Anchorman 2. And I was the oldest cast member of that particular crowd. And I was like, no, we're going to see some proper films. Love Anchorman 2. Don't get me wrong. And I took them to see Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Okay.
And Mother. And they were like, fucking hell, Moyer, what are you taking us to? And then 45 minutes later, we're still standing outside talking and we haven't gone to the bar yet.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect.